Get ready for a steamy and insightful conversation about date night done right and oh so wrong in the world of romance. We're joined by Anna P., who knows a thing or two about creating really memorable dates with their diverse characters. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast contains mature content intended for adult audiences only. Anna, I am so excited to have you on the podcast, our very first author interview. And I was trying to go back and remember when I started reading your books. We Read Smut had done a challenge in the first quarter of 2023, which eons ago, had done a challenge. And it was new to you authors, encouraging us to get outside of our comfort zones and read new authors to us. And I had spotted your book specifically because Amanda from Talk About Swoon had mentioned you and your book as one that actually had dates in it. And I was like, wait a minute. I don't think I have ever read a book other than the billionaire romances where he takes her out on dinner and it's this extravagant, over the top, but like everyday people. There's no dates. It's just Instabang, typically. So I was so excited to read your book and absolutely fell in love with your characters and your series and just the world that you created. If you could start by telling everyone a bit about your series.
First of all, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Yeah, the Love and Wild series currently has 5 books with the 6th on its way very soon. It just follows a bunch of friends in a small town. And I picked the state of Delaware. Don't ask me why. I just picked it on a map and then it just stuck. It's about women of all kinds of sizes and from different backgrounds and just, it's about telling real stories about women like me. So I've written about fat women. I've written about queer women. I've written about nerdy characters and those who love food, which is why there's so many dates, because I think that eating food is like a love language, eating and making food. And I think dates are a good way to do that. And I've discovered this term called issue writer, where authors tackle sometimes really difficult subjects and put it into their books to sort of show that it doesn't have to be a bad thing to talk about it. And that's something that I've been trying to do with my books. So yeah, so 5 books out and they're a mix of sweet and swoony and sexy and they're fun. I think they're fun. I hope they're fun.
I think they are. And
Thank
we
you.
love books that tackle big issues here. The author who's being interviewed after you, in that one, we're talking about trauma and reframing trauma in romance and like why it's so important to create characters because you can relate to these issues and these problems. Now, getting back to the dates, in the first book, it's like date after date. How did you come up with all of those dates? But why do you think that was important specifically for those 2 characters?
Why I came up with the idea for all the dates is these are 2 complete strangers. And I think that when you write a strangers to lovers romance, you need to have them get to know each other. And for me personally, if I am put in a room with someone, that's the best way for me to get to know somebody. Whether it's over food or just sitting at a table together, it's fine because it's conversation. You get to know someone. And so I thought that was really important for Oleander and Jackson to have that kind of moment to bond. And then coming up with all these dates was just simply because Jackson's such he's eager to please. And he's so obsessed with Oleander that he wants to find all of the time that he can with her. So he plans all of these dates and he takes them so seriously. And I was like, oh, nobody's ever done that for me. But if someone did, I would totally say, yes, I will be with you forever. So
Right.
I was just like, why not? Oleander will probably do the exact same thing.
Yes. And I like too that he incorporated a lot of the friends where it wasn't like, I'm going to whisk you away and hoard all of your time. It was very practical and like, I know that your friends make you comfortable. And how can I incorporate that into our dates in a way that feels like I'm being really intentional and not just like, I like this thing, and so let's go on this date. Like, I've dated guys like that, where it's, oh, I like this kind of food. I am not someone who likes seafood. So to have someone be like, oh, we're going to a seafood restaurant. And I'm like, what? Great. I hope they have chicken. But yeah, I love that you had those elements of bringing the friends in Why do you think that authors maybe don't add in those dates? I know it's maybe a little extra work, but like, why do you think that we don't tend to see this in romance books?
I think, like you said, maybe it is a lot of work because it's setting the scene. And sometimes that takes a lot of time and effort. Like the story that we're creating is these two people meet, they fall in love, they have a conflict, and then they get back together. That's the formula that we follow, right? The falling in love part is we sometimes just, it happens really quickly, which is fine because insta love is a thing. And I completely believe in it because I think that crushes are a form of insta love in a way.
Yeah.
So I completely believe in it. I know why people don't do the dates because once you've met, you have your meet cute and then it's the whole wooing process, but then everyone does it very differently. If I was to say, why don't authors do it? I think I would probably need to ask people. And now I'm going to ask people this question because I think it's really interesting. Like, why don't more authors do it? And recently I've been seeing it happen a lot more. I mean, seeing authors put their characters through dates and these awkward situations where they don't know what to do with themselves and how to behave with each other because it's so real. That's the whole thing about dating, right? It is awkward and it's uncomfortable, but it's also fun. Like you said, someone will take you to seafood restaurant when you don't like seafood and you're just like, why would you do this to me? It's an awkward fumble and then they can be like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then they can backtrack and they can fix it. And I feel like that's the whole fun of it. But I think in some way it probably is, like you said, more work. And also it may probably cuts down the amount of time that you have to get them to fall in love. Personally, I think dates are when the characters do fall in love. But it's also, I guess, depending on what the characters are like, the story that you're trying to tell, I think it all falls into place depending on the plot that you're following. I just make sure that all my books have dates. It's so strange to me now that if I write a book without dates in it, it would just be bizarre.
I love that though. And I like thinking about the books that are specifically strangers to lovers, some type of catalyst that kind of puts them together in some way, whether they're neighbors or they're work together or something like that. And I feel like the date aspect really can help if they're maybe not in those type of combined elements, or maybe they're in the same city, but they don't see each other often. And so I think that you do that in a really good way to create something different that we don't see a lot in romances. And so I love that so much. You create some really incredible dates in your books. What do you think are the elements that are needed to create a perfect date night? So if someone's listening and they're like, I want to make better dates or I want in my own personal life, like what makes these romance dates in your books specifically really swoony? And what are some of those ingredients that you always want to make sure that you have in those dates?
Ooh, this is one of those situations where it probably works better in fiction than it does in real life. But I think if I'm going to talk about in terms of writing them, and I think you can maybe replicate them in real life, is just, like you said, understanding what the other person wants. Dating someone, I think it has to start with getting to know them in a very casual sort of setting. I feel like the word date has so much pressure on it. Like it's the time when you have to dress up and you have to be perfect and you have to be all of these things and you have to present yourself in a certain way. But I think getting to know each other over, say, coffee, just to drink a cup of coffee, I think that's a good way to build that relationship. And then from there, so you get to know the person and then you start having these dates. And if I can use almost maybe it's my debut as an example, the first time that they actually talk to each other, he's having a cup of coffee and she's having a hot chocolate. Then he takes her out to a food truck festival and then he starts all of these dates that he plans. And I think getting to know her through that first cup of coffee, hot chocolate, and then the food truck festival, and then he was able to create all of those special dates made such a difference because he was still winging it because he was like, I know this woman, but I don't know her well enough, but let me try. And the one thing that he did know about her was that she enjoys food and he implements food into all of the dates. And I think that is a good way to plan dates, whether it's with your best friend or with your partner. I think knowing what they would like to do is really important. So if there's someone who just wants to go to a rec room, I mean, take them, let them trash things, let them throw axes at things, whatever it is. We need to stop making dates such a pressured thing. Let it be fun and let it be relaxed. The idea is find something that the both of you will enjoy, less pressure. I think less pressure is the most important thing. Keep it so casual that it feels like it's just two friends hanging out. But actually, it's like learning about the other person so that you can figure out what to do next. So I guess that would be my only advice. This comes from a person who is not dating right now. Take that how you will.
I like it though. I think that there's such great ideas. I'm thinking back to now I've been with my husband for 11 years now. Yes, 11 years,
Wow.
which is
Yay.
crazy. But how we met was mutual friends in college. And he will say that the first time he saw me, we started chatting it up and he knew right away he wanted to bang me. Like that is, and I'm like,
love that.
You do know that time when our friends reintroduced us because we had met before that, but you were high as a kite and you don't remember. We ended up getting kicked out of the library because we were laughing so loud. We went up to the other kind of study room where nobody else was in there. And he had me cheesing. And then we were talking from there. I gave him my phone number. I was dating somebody else at the time.
Ooh, look at you.
I know, scandalous. But then I think about like the friends part before we actually hooked up, and then I dumped my boyfriend and then started, hanging out with him. We did a lot of sitting in the library together or texting or even, hey, I'm hungry. Do you want to drive with me to Burger King? Get breakfast. Things like that, where it's like those were the getting to know you moments. And then 3 months later, we moved in together. It's fun.
If it makes sense. You just have to follow it. I think that's the key.
But like that first part, right, I think is so important in getting to know somebody or dating someone. Like, get the pressure off. It's okay. They don't have to be your life partner forever. And you also don't have to do anything overly extravagant. I don't need 50 gifts. Honestly, just going to dinner and like shutting the place down, like that is a lot more fun to me, which like that's what my husband and I did for our 10-year anniversary. We went to a restaurant. And they were like, hey, we're closing. Like 20 minutes, you got to go. And we were like, oh, wait, everyone is gone. Our bad. That's what I want personally in my relationships. And that's even what I like in my friendships is like, hey, we were supposed to only have an hour on here. It's 3 hours later. I know you got to go. I got to go. I got more to say, though. Like those are the kinds of conversations that really create that intimacy. And so I love that you add these dates in because I think it does add in that intimacy that a lot of insta-love or insta-lust books tend to miss. And even the slow burn books, I feel like they miss. A lot of readers lately have been saying this thing and I'm like, oh, yes, I see what you're saying. And that is, I didn't feel like these characters were meant to be together. Or I didn't really feel like I was cheering them on in their relationship because you don't really know them well. And I feel like when you create these dates, you as a reader get to know them so well that you're like, yes, absolutely. I get it. You guys are great together. I can understand why he did the dates this way, or I can understand why she's hesitant, but also a little intrigued. I can see all of that. I love it. And I think that it's so great. Now, a lot of not all of them, but some of your books are that slow burn. Do you find that the dates make that slow burn a better payoff?
Ooh, I don't know. I've never thought of it that way. That's a really interesting way to look at it. I think the biggest slow burn that I've written so far is Almost Home. And a lot of their dates are at home because he cooks. And I think that, in a way, maybe, because you're building all this tension. And that's the whole thing about these dates as well, right? Like even you said, like when you met your husband and you guys were talking and you were spending all of this time together and you build this relationship, and that relationship is still building some tension because there's all this attraction. You don't know, oh my God, what do I do with this? How do I react? How do I behave? And oh my God, I've got this other person that I'm seeing, but what do I do? What do I do? There's just so much going on. So I think dates do help with building that sort of tension in a slow burn because then it sets the scene for where these characters are going. And you get to see them in different situations where one of them is just flustered about being with the other person. The other person just, like with Everly and Lachlan from Almost Home, he's always flustered around her and she's so oblivious because she's just so unaware that she has this effect on him. And that tension was really fun to write because he's just like, why does she not get it? And she's just like, what's going on with this man? I don't get it at all. So yeah, maybe you're right. I never thought of it that way, but I think that dates can definitely the payoff for that slow burn. Because the whole reason people like slow burns is because of that tension that you're building between these characters. Will they, won't they? Oh my God, an almost kiss. Oh, it's brushing of hands. It's like this, you're building it. And all that can happen on dates. So yeah, let's go with yes, because now I love that idea.
And I have to say, Almost Home and Lachlan, my absolute favorite character that you have ever written.
Thank
I
you.
love him so much. And also the fact that she's demisexual, I think, also ties in really well to that slower burn and her obliviousness and him being like, no, I'm in love with you. It's official. It doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
It's just
exactly.
so good. So good. How do you approach writing these date nights? So are some from experience or stories that you've heard? I mean, I just gave you my whole dating history story. But what are some of those things that you use as inspiration?
I don't have a lot of dating experience. A lot of my dating experience was meeting eligible bachelors for when I was getting married off, which is one of the things that I put into Oleander's book where she meets with an eligible bachelor found by her grandmother. And that date was as uncomfortable in real life as it was on the page. I thought it was important that everybody see just how cringy it can be. But I think most of my dates just come from my imagination. It's something that my mom has always said, that I have always had the most vivid imagination. I love people watching. So I will put two random strangers who have never looked at each other before in a situation. And by the end of the hour that I'm sitting and watching them, they're married with a bajillion kids. This is just the way my brain works. I think with creating these dates, it was the same thing. It was just, what would I want to do when I meet someone? And as I've said, all of my dates involve food. I hate the word foodie. It's something that I've always tried not to use. It's a weird thing. I'm not even going to go into explaining why, but it's just this weird dislike I have for the word. But that's what I am. I grew up not having a good relationship with food. And as an adult, I've just built this amazing relationship with it that I want. So food is a positive thing in my books. It's something that we love and we cherish and we appreciate. So if I was to go on a date with someone, what would I want to eat? And then, so the first one had milkshakes, the second one had pies, and then the third one just had everything. And then I think it just goes from there. So it's just my imagination, one. Two, what would I want to do on a date with this person that I've never met? And then build it from there. It is really hard though. Like, I completely understand why a lot of people don't do it, because coming up with unique date ideas in every book, and I've written 6 books now, and all 6 books, I had to make sure that I do not overlap any of the dates, because sometimes I'm writing two books at a time, and I will find so many similarities, and I'm like, oh my God, this is annoying. So the same thing with dates. And I think if you are someone who has a partner and you go on dates, it's probably easier to come up with ideas because you've got this real life experience. I don't have that. So I'm just like, imagination, let's open up my mind and see what I can get out of it. So yeah, it's just things that I would like to do and things I would probably do with my friends. So why not?
What do you consider as the date night disasters? Or maybe you mentioned the one in your book. If you could tell us a little bit more about that one for anyone who hasn't read it yet. And then what are some things that you think really can ruin a date?
Oof, I think Bollywood has done a good job of it. But like Indian families, when the girls are 21, 22, they start sending us out to meet these eligible boys who are like perfect husband material. We're not perfect wife materials, but they're perfect husband material. And then you have these really uncomfortable dates with these men who talk about themselves and don't ask you questions. I think any date is a disaster when the person sitting across from you pretends to be interested in you, but is actually only interested in you if you care about what they have to say. And I think that is like the nightmare of all dates. Between the ages of 22 and 24, I've met a whole bunch of guys. By the end of it, I was just like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. It hurts because there's only so many things that you can talk about on a date. So disaster dates are just people who are sort of seeing you to feel good about themselves or because they're forced into it. Sometimes blind dates can be really uncomfortable. And I think that I've heard lots of horror stories about blind dates, and I'm just like, oh, I would not. Technically, that's what these arranged marriage meetings are. They're all blind dates because you just see a picture of them. Sometimes you don't even see that. You're just going off of what someone else has told someone else and told someone else. Because my grandmother would get all this information from her friends, and she'll say, oh yeah, he's perfect for you because he does this. And I'm like, what? He does what? Which is exactly what I did in book 1. Oleander's grandmother says, oh, he works at NASA. You like space. And she's like, when I was a child, not now. So she still meets this guy. And then, of course, there is the other thing where they belittle you because your job is not as fancy as theirs. I think Disasters are just basically when the partner, it doesn't matter who it is, but if the partner sitting across from you just does not give two hoots about you or your life or the things that you've experienced, and they think that all of the choices that you make in life are less than theirs, we don't have time for that. It's just not, they're not important at all.
No. Oh my goodness. So I have had, I'm thinking about like my own dating experiences. I remember I went to go see a movie and it was a horror movie. I don't like horror movies. I can't. That was a miserable date.
Good.
And this was somebody that like, okay, this is 2010 online dating, like app dating. Before app dating was even like a thing. This was the hookup app dating because that's all you're there for. I was living in New York City and I was meeting some guys and I was having a good time. And I'm like, my mom's like, Alicia, you're meeting people on the internet. You're going to end up in a suitcase somewhere. And I'm like, whatever, Mom, you don't know anything. And so I went to this movie. It was a terrible date. But then he took me to this Cuban restaurant afterwards, and that was a lot of fun. But even thinking about like conversations that I've had, I don't get out a lot now because I like to be home. I already got the husband and the kids. We're fine. Like I don't need to go out and meet people. But as a podcaster, which I do for my day job, I meet a lot of people virtually. And I have had conversations, and I'm thinking about one person that was on my podcast where it's video. I can see her. She can see me. And every time I started talking, she looked down at her phone. And I was like, oh no. Oh, this is really uncomfortable. But like doing that at a date, that would be terrible.
Yeah. That's a red flag right there. Just no. Don't even. No.
And then thinking about this other guy, like, I mean, I have some ADHD tendencies. I tend to look around as I'm talking. I do all that. But if someone's talking, I'm hyper fixated and focused on you and what you're saying. And yes, my brain's running a million miles an hour, but I want to make sure that I'm visibly staying focused on you. And I was on a podcast, so I'm the guest. And this guy, as he's talking, or as I'm talking, he's going like this. You can't see me if you're listening, but I'm swinging back and forth in my chair and I'm looking up at the ceiling. And I was like, bro.
Oh my goodness.
That is not
that is
good
awful.
Like, it's literally just a 30 to 45 minute conversation. But if you can't even give me that, come on.
That's terrible. Oh, God.
Yeah. And I could tell that he was at the point where he did not want to keep doing his podcast. He was having a lot of conversations that were just not really fulfilling. I'm like, at that point, pause, reassess your life decisions before you move on. And maybe that's something that we need to do if we're finding ourselves getting really bored with dates, then maybe pause, reassess what is working, what's not, and does this need to continue? So yes, those are my personal experiences for terrible situations.
Those are definitely disasters, nightmares, things that could happen on dates. And I'm sorry that happened to you. Even though they weren't dates, I'm still sorry that it happened to you at all.
Thank you. Have you written any that were maybe less than spectacular dates where the characters still end up together? So it wasn't any like side character drama, but there was a date where maybe it didn't go to plan or didn't go the way that people wanted to, but it still actually moved the relationship forward because they were more real or more personal.
Oh, wow. I don't know. I think with In Almost Yours, Ginny and Gavin, that book is just full of rage. They love each other, but they hate each other. It's just chaos. And I think all of the dates, all of the things that they do together, there's always this underlying sort of tension of, oh my God, one of them is going to snap. And I think I tried very hard not to put it, but at the same time, thought it was kind of important for their relationship because they have so much of this history. I don't think so, now that I'm thinking about it, but I feel like I should do that with my next couple books. Because it'd be so fun, right? Imagine putting those characters in that situation where it seems really perfect on the surface, but it's actually just, it's almost a disaster. And they end the night and you're just like, nope, they're never going to see each other again. Oh my God, that would be so fun to write. Thank you. I'm gonna put that into the next book.
There you go. Looking forward to your new cricket romance, which is going to be coming out very soon from when this airs. Why cricket? First of all, I think about cricket and I immediately go to, I don't do sports teams in general. Like sometimes I'll watch NASCAR, but that's about as good as it gets. My husband and my kids, they love watching football. They love watching soccer. We've watched a little bit of hockey. Any animal teams, they get the hoorah, right? Like, and so we introduced them to these things, but cricket is one that I don't think I've ever seen on TV. And the only time I was like, oh, cricket is a sport was from a Bluey episode, which is very parent of me. I think I sent you the episode because I was like, oh my God. Like and it's such a great episode. Go watch it. We'll have it in the show notes if you're like, wait, cricket and Bluey? What is this? Go watch the episode. It's so cute. But that was my first introduction to like other sports out there that are not American that people love and people enjoy. And cricket is one of those. First, like, what is cricket? For anyone who's like, wait a minute, I don't think I've ever heard of a cricket romance. And then why cricket?
Now, I think a lot of people would say that cricket, the minute you think of cricket, you think of the Indian cricket team, because my country has just made it into this, I don't know what we've done with the sport, but we've made it huge. But it was started by the British, and then they brought it to all of the the colonized nations, and they introduced it to the people. But cricket it's like baseball. I think that is probably because there's a bat, there's a ball, there's a batter. In baseball, there's a pitcher, but in cricket, there's a bowler. You've got to do runs to get points. In baseball, you have a home run. In cricket, you have boundary shots. There's a 6, which is like the home run because it flies. There's a 4, which sort of runs across the whole field and hits the boundary line. It's a really interesting sport once you sort of wrap your mind around it. And now, just so you're aware, there's a US cricket team. They participated in the World Cup this year. The US was actually one of the hosts for the World Cup. They had it in New York. I think, was it New York? Yeah. They didn't do very well. I think they have potential, the US team, but they just really did not deliver what they should have, considering the number of the incredible players they had. As for why I decided to write a cricket romance, why not? No, I'm kidding. I wanted to write a sports romance. Obviously, that's something that it's always been in my mind, but I don't know American football. I don't know hockey. I don't know baseball. The only sport that I do know is basketball. Because when I grew up, I used to play it and I used to watch. I was a huge NBA watcher. Like I supported the Lakers, the Chicago Bulls. These were like my teams and I was obsessed, like obsessively NBA. But it didn't seem right as an Indian to write about American sports because I'm just like, what do I know besides what I'm seeing other people write, what I'm watching? And fun fact, for the last, say, 15 years, I have hated cricket. It's so strange to say, but I think all of us in India grow up watching cricket. It's not even a national sport, by the way, but people treat it that way because it's just the athletes are so good. And it used to be called a gentleman's sport because when the British were doing it, till maybe 15 years ago when I stopped watching it, I still thought of it as a gentleman's sport because it was just pure athleticism. And I thought these guys were incredible. And then I feel like it switched where all the athletes started becoming celebrities and they started getting brand endorsements and they became, I don't know, it took away the essence of what cricket was, which is why I stopped watching it. But there's something called the IPL, which is the Indian Premier League, which happens every year. I think there are 12 or 13 teams. I might be getting that wrong because my stats are just so bad right now. But teams named after cities in India, which has players from India, I think Sri Lanka, from England, from Australia. So from all of the big cricket teams, all these players come together in different city teams and they play against each other over the period of 1 month to pick up the champion of the IPL. So this year during the IPL, I was with my dad and he watches it every year. And I sat down to watch one match. And it completely changed my life. And I was just like, oh, this is why I don't watch the sport anymore. It is just, there was this one young player on the team that I supported, the Chennai Super Kings, because Chennai is the city that I'm from. And there's this one player on the Chennai Super Kings. And just watching him was like, he blew my mind. And I was like, oh, okay. So we're going to write this romance now. And then I actually wrote that first draft in the period of when the IPL was happening. And by the time I finished it, I was just like, holy smokes, I'm actually going to publish this. And then, so yeah, here we are. First cricket romance of my life.
I love it.
So yeah, there we go.
I think it's so great. I like that when you're taking one that a sport that you understand, that you enjoy. I watch or I read some of the sports books and I'm just like, what is happening in this? Go sports team. Like, that's literally how I feel every time something's on. I'm just like, yay, waving my number one little finger gun thing. Like, yeah, it's fine. Everything's fine. But when I think about like sports in other countries, like the number one that I think of, like, ooh, this is a good romance, is rugby. Because God, those
please,
those players, good Lord.
I mean,
thigh muscles.
I know.
And then every time I see soccer, like, me and my husband are always making fun of like soccer players because the slightest bump and they're like, I'm down.
So dramatic.
So dramatic. NBA, yes, I grew up like watching that. That's fine. Hockey, never grew up watching it. And all I imagine with like hockey players, and it always makes me laugh when I see these hockey romances, and I'm like, how many teeth does this dude have? Because every hockey player I've seen has had a lot of work done or has no teeth. What is happening? It feels almost like out of the realm of possibility to me sometimes, especially with some of these like college level ones. I'm just like, this is getting out of hand. And so I love that you're taking a different sport, a different approach from what we typically see right now. And let's just say you're starting a trend, because I know there are a few ones coming out next year or in the next 2 years or so that are going to be based around this. With that in mind, and your cricket specifically romance, are there any dates that we can look forward to in that book specifically?
So because he's a professional athlete and he's in the spotlight, a lot of their dates are like quiet and private and under the radar. So I do have a couple of things. In my first draft, I had, I think, one date, which is so sad now that I think about it. But I plotted out a couple of dates for the second draft, which is what I'm working on right now. I don't want to give anything away just yet, but there's some sneaking around, midnight meals, because that's the only way they can probably escape the paparazzi. So yeah, I think that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about the second draft, was sort of finding ways around the celebrity sort of thing. And I think what a lot of billionaire romances have is that the billionaire is always really famous, so he has to sneak her away on his private jet or whatever to go. But that I don't do any of that here, because even though he's famous, she's richer than he is, but she doesn't fly him anywhere because she's just like, I can't be bothered. But I love that. So yeah, I think there are some cute dates. I think one of the things I've started doing now is a lot of domestic dates. I like seeing the characters in the kitchen moving around each other, bumping hands and bumping hips and cooking together. There's something which is what I did a lot with in Almost Love, which is the 5th book. It had them moving around the kitchen a lot, spending a lot of time together in close spaces like her home or his home. And which is what I'm trying to do with this one as well, because those are still dates, but they're slightly more intense because it's just the two of them. And it builds that sort of the tension that we were talking about earlier as well. But this is not a slow burn. It starts with the one night stand and it just goes from there.
Oh, I love those. Those are some of my favorites, where it's nice off the bat. Those are always really fun. Anna, this has been so much fun. Where can people find you, buy your books, get to know you, all of that fun stuff?
You can find me on Instagram. Unfortunately, that's the only place that I am on right now, at Anna Writes Here. And my website is annawriteshere.com. All of my books are in Kindle Unlimited, except for Love Song Take 2, which is a holiday romance that is available wide. So if you use Kobo or Apple Books, you can get the book there. But yeah, so my Love and Wilde series finishes early this year, and then on to the next and on to the next. So look forward to the cricket romance.
Yes, I'm so excited. I think it's going to be wonderful, and I cannot wait to read it.